I want to talk a little bit about Aarogyasri. So the reason why Aarogyasri is interesting is because it's a very large program, health insurance program run by Andhra Pradesh for almost now more than 11 years. The designers of Ayushman Bharat have explicitly referenced Aarogyasri and its successes while coming up with the more salient aspects of Ayushman Bharat. So, but given that Andhra Pradesh is not a small state, the combined Telangana and Andhra Pradesh population is 80 million. And so we can learn something from the operations of this program for a long time and see what we can draw lessons from that. And if Ayushman Bharat has to make mistakes, it should make original mistakes which are, not, and not repeat the mistakes of Aarogyasri. So let me just get started with this and structure these thoughts that we have, right, in a three-way problem. So in any health insurance program which is operated by the government, there are essentially three actors. In Aarogyasri, there were three actors. You can, in a implementation of Ayushman Bharat, also think of a fourth actor. So, but the three main actors are patients. You can imagine that if you fall sick, you become a patient. You need to have some treatment. You have hospitals. Particularly in the new emergent landscape, we never thought of private hospitals as important. The hospitals were operated by the government, so they were part of the government infrastructure. But in the health insurance schemes, the public Ayushman Bharat style, we'll have hospitals as independent players, and finally there's the government. So what are the concerns of these three operators? And these are very important to keep in mind, and particularly in our analysis of Aarogyasri, these were key concerns. So first is that patients, right? We tend to think of poor patients as, they don't have options. But actually in our study of Aarogyasri, we found that the program, and this will be almost universal, is that patients can choose hospitals. They are going to choose hospitals they might be living in a rural area, and they're willing to travel to different places, particularly in large cities. They are aware of quality of care. Right? So they're going to think about what quality of care different hospitals provide, different private hospitals provide, right? And even in an environment where the government is paying by the procedure, at the same time, the patients are also incurring multiple costs when they're accessing care. So, for instance, a hospital located very far away is going to involve much more travel costs, stay cost, all these things. And so this cost of access is still borne by patients, even when the government is providing reimbursement to hospitals. The hospitals, by the way, also have to choose. Private hospitals can always choose to stay out of programs and not participate in in the government program. And this is something that is key. Private hospitals think hard about their profitability. Even when they're publicly spirited, they think hard about profitability when they're choosing whether to participate or not. Conditional on participation, they think about what quality of care to provide. So think about, say, a heart patient, are they going to invest much more into making sure that the heart patient recovers well, keep them around longer, so on and so forth. So they can increase the quality of care or decrease it. And a key component of that is that they incur higher costs when they provide higher quality of care. They also care about their competitors, right? So, so in Andhra Pradesh particularly, there are a large number of private as well as government hospitals. And the quality of care is provided much more when there are more competitors in the same market, in the same district. So finally, there's the government. So the government has to make decisions as well. They're going to think about reimbursement rates. And this has been a key issue in Andhra Pradesh. What is the reimbursement rate per procedure to provide? This is not the maximum cover per household. Currently, we are talking about 5 lakh rupees as Ayushman Bharat's cover plus household. But in addition, there is also a decision to be made about what is the reimbursement rate to provide to the hospital. Say if there's a long bone fracture or an open heart surgery, how much to compensate the hospital. And this has been an important aspect of the government's decision as well. Of course, the government can provide high reimbursement rates. Then all the hospitals will want to participate in the program, because they're going to per procedure get a lot. But then the problem is that the government will run out of money today, and tomorrow there will be no money left for patients tomorrow. So those are the trade-offs inherent, that today's patients can be taken care of by providing high reimbursement rates, and then there'll be nothing left over for tomorrow's patients. So this is the structure with which we thought about Aarogyasri. The fourth player is the insurance company. Now, in Aarogyasri, there was no independent insurance company, so we are ignoring that for the moment. But let me just describe Aarogyasri scheme in more detail. It was a health insurance program started by the AP government in 2007. It covered BPL families, but Andhra Pradesh has a very high poverty line. So almost 80% of the population was covered by it. So in that sense, it's as close to a universal scheme as you might imagine. It has no premiums, cashless, deductible, and for the time it provided fairly high coverage per family. There were a large number of treatments, and private and public hospitals all were empaneled in the program. Now, the key thing over here is that Aarogyasri was quite successful. A very large number of people actually participated in the program. And by 2015, more than 3.3 million procedures have been taken place under various different categories in the 8th year of the program. So let me just sum up some important findings that we have. One is that quality matters. So so the Aarogyasri program was kind enough to share a lot of data with us, and through that we've been able to investigate the workings of the scheme over the last few years. One is, of course, that quality matters. So it's not as if patients don't understand medical quality. They do. And particularly, patients recognize which are the hospitals that are likely to provide better services versus those who are not. Right? So patients can recognize quality quite well. The second lesson was that distance matters. So patients like to have services close by rather than far away. The third is that informed patients particularly, those who are from within the local area, so in this case we defined it as a district, are willing to trade off quality and convenience, right? So distances. The fourth lesson was that there's a positive correlation between quality and hospital market share. So when hospitals provide better quality, they actually attract more patients, and this is a key lesson, right? So in a competitive environment, this was a particularly important finding, that when competition increases, for hospitals, the best way for them, the private hospitals, to get more patients was to increase their quality of care. And the last lesson is that the cost of care that we have learned about is much higher for urban hospitals than for rural ones. And so this means is that the rural hospitals, it's profitable for them to participate in the Aarogyasri program, but not so much for the urban ones. So if you have a single reimbursement rate per procedure and through the entire program, what will end up happening is that a lot of urban hospitals will not participate in the program, whereas for rural hospitals for whom the costs are inherently lower will participate in the program. So this is a key lesson for policymakers to keep in mind when they're designing the reimbursement rates for the different programs, right? I just want to end by addressing two important points that I've seen in the newspapers, in the press so far, as perhaps criticisms of the Ayushman Bharat, and what we can address with this Aarogyasri lessons. So first is that I read a report by Professor Jodres, who's a very eminent economist. We've all learned a lot from him. But he said that even if the annual financial outlay for Ayushman Bharat was 10,000 crore rupees, he called it chicken feed for the purpose of providing health insurance. He said that it comes out to be only 200 rupees per person. Now that number is accurate, but actually, we did some calculations for Aarogyasri as well. And what we learned over there is that we took a look at the total expenditures over the entire time period of 2007 to 2015, a time in which 31 lakh procedures were performed. The key lesson over here is that per procedure, the cost is 24,000 rupees per procedure. So when we talk about 5 lakh rupees as a coverage, I have to tell you that most households will not use that. 5 lakh rupees corresponds to multiple organ failure and long stays in the hospital. And thank goodness, most of us don't have that every year in most households. Instead, what happens is that the coverage is actually used quite rarely, simply because most patients who are covered by the program will use the program only once or twice in their entire lifetime. In that case, a 24,000 rupee procedure is actually quite effective. So we also took a look at what happens if the PMJAY budgets 200 rupees per person. Because most people are not using tertiary care every day, essentially this works out to be about 20,000 rupees per procedure, which compares well with Aarogyasri's success of a cost of about 24,000 rupees. So the 10,000 crore rupees per year to cover 50 crore individuals is not an unrealistic number in terms of public finances, right? So this is one lesson. The other lesson that I read about is, just choosing individuals. So, this is Anil Swarup, who was one of the designers of RSBY. And he talked about the, key problem, which is identifying who is a beneficiary. And for some reason, we have decided to slice and dice our population and saying that this person is, eligible and this person is not eligible to participate in a program. And, Ayushman Bharat will use the latest socioeconomic and caste census, which none of us have access to. Only, select individuals in government have access to this data. And so this secret data set is going to, sorry to call it this, but is going to be used to determine who is eligible and who is not. And so, in addition, this Ayushman Bharat will then use a fancy computer system, network, so on and so forth, to check beneficiaries against their Aadhaar information, against the socio-economic census in a real-time basis. So, so Anil Swarup is flagging the fact that it's very difficult to identify when someone shows up at your door with a medical emergency to know if they're a true beneficiary or not. And, if the per procedure outlay is only 20,000 rupees, my argument is, why restrict the program to 50 crore individuals? We can perhaps, increase budgetary outlays and make this a more universal program. And one of the advantages is then is that you don't need to do all this inclusion and exclusion all the time and check on that. So a universal scheme might have these advantages of reducing errors on identification. It might also create a larger market for the public sector, for the private sector to enter. So many more hospitals might be interested, many more hospitals might come up. We talked about the HR challenges. Many more doctors might be trained, nurses might be trained when we have greater financial outlays, right? And the final is one thing that one of my teachers taught me is that any scheme for the poor becomes a poor scheme. So the advantage of having more empowered individuals also be beneficiaries in the scheme is that they are the people who make noise anytime something goes wrong. And so whenever you have a more inclusive scheme, perhaps it will just operate better because there's this implicit monitoring built in.